Welcome to the Pixel Professor podcast. Today is June 3rd, 2024. Is that right?
It is. I was just about
you
to
looked all
correct you. I was
doubtful.
like, June? I was like, it's June? Yes, it is. You are correct.
The third day of June, 2024, no matter what E-Rock Tenor tells you.
The year of our Lord.
And today we're going to talk about another episode of the Pixel Professor podcast where we take a deep dive into the scholarly side of video games.
Yeah. You're just always so smooth with the intro. I just wanted you to know that. Like, it
just rolls
flows
off the tongue.
It sure does. I mean, I'm the one who put that intro together, so maybe it's my fault. Maybe it's me. Maybe it's not you, it's me.
Well, that's generally the right answer,
Yeah.
but also I forgot to pull it up. So
So then you did pretty good.
it was off the top of my head.
I'm here for it.
As soon as the countdown started, I was like, "Oh shoot, I have not.
What
I've
do I
only
do?
partially memorized the intro."
I feel like a smooth intro would be such a shock that we'd lose viewers if we did that.
Yeah,
So,
that's true,
listeners and stuff.
especially
Yeah.
on my weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm joined here by E-Rock Center,
Yep, that's
a
me.
distinguished professor,
Mm.
and a video game expert.
Am I a video game expert? I think I might. We're getting there anyway. We're learning.
I think you're a video game expert.
I feel like there's just so much to learn. I actually have my doubts that they truly exist, and which is why we need more podcasts like this. Because the more I dig around for information, the harder it is to find actual spaces where everything is sort of put together and codified. In a way. I love all the people who have really gone into Wikipedia and helped out by creating all of these different, I would call them scholarly resources, but it's still such a young field. I think there's so much to learn.
You were doubting whether video games exist.
Well,
And I was wondering where that was going, because I'm pretty sure they do exist.
well, they exist on a round Earth.
Oh, that's true.
You know what I mean? Yeah. So they don't really exist, in other words.
Yeah, that's fair.
It's took a strange turn. They do exist. Or are we in a video game is the deeper question, as in, are we in a simulation and we are someone else's video game?
Well, the important thing is that even within the simulation, there are video games.
That's meta right there.
Yeah.
And not the company, but like meta in its scope.
What if Meta made the game that we're all in?
Is there... Ooh, ugh. That feels yucky. That being said, so we're getting to the point where we're like it's like a pyramid meta scheme where like we're going to create these video games and get the deeper and deeper into the video game worlds that we create, and then we're going to have our own simulatees.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And then we'll become the gods of those worlds that we created, and then they're going to make podcasts and wonder if they're in a video game.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's. I think we've done
That's,
it. Yeah.
That's the end of that. I think we solved it. So
Mhm.
you're welcome.
Yeah.
And I did have a question about your username though.
Yes.
Have you had other gamer tags before E-Rock Tenor, or was this the one that you were just born with and you just ran with from day one?
No, I've gone through a few, and none of them have quite stuck for very long. This one came because someone called me this once, and this one felt good. Someone misspelled my name once, like because the I and the
Who
O
would misspell your name?
Well, they usually the misspelling, like I don't know. This is a spoiler. My name is Eric. I don't know if anyone can tell. So world.
You're not
here I am.
V-Rock?
That's no. I could not
Man,
claim that.
I should have known that before.
So maybe you want a new podcast partner, because
This is
Rock
awkward.
would certainly draw more of a crowd. That being said, like the I and the O are next to each other, and one day a friend of mine was like emailing me or texting me, and he spelled it EROC. And I looked at that and I was like, "Ooh!" And he went, "This is so cool. You sound like a professional wrestler, E-Rock." And I was like, "Well, that's probably because there is a professional wrestler called The Rock." And but either way, and then the tenor thing got added on, which you're never supposed to do. You're never supposed to use a number in your name, even though it's cute. See, like from a searching, like when you're actually, I'm breaking a bunch of rules in the way it has my name in it and the tenor. But it's the one that stuck the longest. One guy once told me I should do my name spelled backwards, because it spells sire, like Cire, and then he was like, but spell it cool, like Psyre, and I used that for a while.
Well, that's
Now that we've talked about the origin story of my username, though, which isn't particularly interesting, I'm curious: is yours just the PhD part? Like, how long have you been Swift with the PhD?
just for a couple of years. Before that, I was charging turtles everywhere.
Wait, not everywhere wasn't part of the username. You were charging turtles was your username.
Yeah, that's
Not charging
right.
turtles everywhere. So
No.
where in the world does charging turtles come from?
When I was a kid, my cousin started a Juno email account. Do you remember Juno?
I do.
And
Yes.
her email address, walkingducks@juno.com. I was like, that is a cool thing. I like that. What verb and what gerund and noun, what gerund and animal
thank you
should
for
I do?
being more specific about verb versus gerund. I'm sure our audience would have been like, there would have been so many emails correcting you. Yes, thank you.
Well,
Anyway, yes,
many. Yes. And I turtles are just probably my favorite animal. So
really,
what do turtles do? They don't charge, and so that's why they were.
It's ironic. Oh,
There you go.
or paradoxical is what it actually is, right? It's more of a paradox than an irony.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And the Swift family motto from like back in the day when there was like a crest and a castle and all that stuff.
Yes.
It's hurry slowly.
Wait, are you serious?
Yeah. So
whoa,
that worked out. I didn't do that on purpose, but it worked out pretty well.
So it's playing on Swift.
Mm-hmm.
Hurry
Well,
slow.
I don't know.
Or is it? You said it's a Swift family crest.
Yeah,
Where is
I
Swift
guess
from? Is it British?
Irish.
So it has to be, right? Hurry slowly is saying like our last name may be Swift, but be present, y'all.
Yeah, exactly.
Man.
Festina lente.
Festina lente. That's Latin for
charging turtles.
Lente means slow.
Mm-hmm. And festina means hurry.
Man, that's charging turtles. I missed then. I've never even heard of it, but now I'm missing charging turtles. I thought it was just like, here's Swift being funny. What's the last thing that would charge? Turtles. Charging turtles, because those aren't intimidating at all. Because you are just a kind human being, and it's just sort of like this. It's like projecting humility in a humorous way, which is how I feel. Yeah. You do that all the time. And it's just, and now you had to throw a PhD in your name, and you became a little more pretentious.
Yeah, I mean, I thought, why project humility when I could project superiority in the absence of superiority?
That's a really good question. I think we should all ask ourselves that. Well, charging turtles. I like it. I like it a lot. Well, and I like the idea of hurry slowly a lot too. I think that's a new motto. I recently related to that. Do you watch F1, like a Formula One racing? I do enjoy Formula One racing. I almost took the bait on that one again. So in Formula One racing, I can't remember the name of the racer. The commentator talked about this. There's a famous saying by a classic racer, and I can't remember who it was. Said, "You want to win." Man, I'm gonna mess it up, but it's the same idea. You want to win at the slowest speed possible. And because the idea is longevity. The idea is you don't want to push the limits all the time, because that's usually where mistakes are made and where equipment fails. So you want to win at the slowest speed possible.
I like it.
There was something I saw that as a life lesson. Like, we're always charging, but we should be charging turtles. Man, this is good advice.
If you're wondering, I know I could see in your eyes that you were wondering how you would say hurry slowly.
Yes.
In Sindarin, in Elvish.
Lord of the Rings. You read my mind. Indeed.
Yep. It's Rongo Long.
Rongo Long.
Yep.
There's a battle cry for you. Rongo Long. Sindarin. Is this the Elvish language of the Lord of the Rings?
It is.
It's called Sindarin?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that. What kind of a Lord of the Rings fan am I? Have you read the Silmarillion? So you're like, are you that deep into the lore?
I have not read it. No,
Well,
but
I've read part of it.
I've read the title. So
I've read a
take
chunk
that.
of it. And then it was like, I need to give my brain a rest so I can come at this again. And now that it's been about 4 years, maybe I can try again.
I wrote my
have to
honors
start at the
thesis
beginning.
on Lord of the Rings.
You did?
Yeah,
Wow. Honors thesis, like undergrad honors thesis?
undergrad.
Yeah, that's really cool. So and did you write it in Cinderin?
Oh, I should have. Man, why didn't I think of that?
Come on. Are you? Oh, you better go back and do it. And not with AI, Cinderin AI, like everybody uses.
Like everybody does. Well, this is actually a perfect segue.
Yes, it is.
Into talking about what we're going to talk about this week, which has nothing to do with Lord of the Rings, unfortunately.
No, we can make it have to do with Lord of the Rings. I'm on it. I'm on the job.
I mean, Lord of the Rings is like Kevin Bacon of topics.
Yes. I think it's even fewer degrees of separation.
Yeah, totally.
Totally, yes.
Because Elijah Wood plays video games, and then boom, you got to Lord of the Rings.
And if Lord of the Rings could be my third space, I mean, can you imagine?
Third space?
Can you imagine if the Shire was like your third? What is the third space?
Third spaces. We're gonna get there in just a second. First of all, we're gonna talk about bowling.
Yep.
Because
obviously,
of course, in about 2000, there was this book called Bowling Alone that came out. Have you ever heard of this book?
No, Bowling Alone. But that
Bowling
one
Alone is written by Robert Putnam,
I like that name.
he's written a couple of interesting books since then. But his whole idea was about the decline of social capital, particularly in America. But I think it's it's happening quite a bit across the world, and especially in the Western world,
for sure,
where we used to gather at bowling alleys, and we'd have bowling leagues, and people would get together every Wednesday or whatever and go bowling. And now, and by now I mean 24 years ago, he started to notice some trends where people would go bowling alone, and they wouldn't have these areas. The social capital was declining, and there's been a lot of, that kind of kicked off a firestorm of people talking about, why is social capital bottoming out, and what can we do about it, and is that really a bad thing? Maybe it's a good thing. It's not a good thing.
No.
And it has coincided with the kind of the decline of religion, or the rise of religious nuns, where people are still NONES, not like nuns.
Though I imagine there's a decline there.
Probably.
Yeah.
Sorry to all our nun listeners.
Yes,
we do love nuns.
Yes, shout out.
Not a decline in the quality of nuns, but in the number
of nuns.
The nun number. Yeah, so as fewer people are belonging to organized religion, that's kind of coincided with this decline in social capital, and political polarization has kind of increased around the same time, where you've got less interaction between groups of people. So there's less of a chance that you're going to run into somebody like at the bowling. If you were part of a bowling league, I imagine, I was never part of a bowling league, but you would go and there would be people from all various walks of life. The super rich they probably had their own like exclusive bowling clubs.
Instead of bowling polo.
Yeah, exactly. But generally speaking, there was, a cross section of people that you could engage with. And it wasn't just bowling alleys. It was, whatever place people would go to hang out and talk with each other.
Traditionally, isn't it places like, I recall reading at least some articles about this, and it was probably about 15, 20 years ago as well. Things like public houses, like pubs and such, used to be big time coffee houses.
Coffee houses.
Big time. And those, from a political perspective, even if you were on opposite sides, I think people on opposite sides of things used to talk to each other instead of just to themselves, which of course algorithms nowadays don't help with, right?
Exactly.
They keep us just talking in our own little echo chambers. But
because Facebook does not make money if I'm mad,
right?
Or if I'm so mad that I turn off Facebook.
Well, Facebook doesn't make money if you're content in general, right? Like what keeps you scrolling is
true.
When something that agrees with your viewpoint makes you angry, Like, yes, those stupid whatevers, because they're
Yep.
not pushing. They're pushing materials that are going to get you clicking, right? Clickbait sort
Yeah.
of materials, and
Yeah.
those are is designed to, inflame. Is that
Yeah.
a word? To
Yeah.
inflame?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway,
Or
yes,
when you hear something that's kind of a simplified version of the other side,
yes,
and you can be like, wow, everyone who disagrees with me is such an idiot.
yeah,
I want to stay on this site because I feel like I'm part of the in crowd. Yeah. So
yeah. As
algorithms are
opposed
kind of
to
the
if you were,
opposite.
yes, exactly. And if you were sitting in a pub with that person, there's a human face to it, to that
Yeah.
idea, and you're less likely. Yeah. Anyway, that third space from a social capital perspective used to be so important. That's right.
And so the first and second spaces are home and work.
Mm-hmm.
Generally speaking, a lot of people have a home or a place
That's
where
the
it is
whole.
their home space.
Yes.
And then you go to work, and that's kind of your workspace. And then the third space is somewhere where it's not either of those other places. Somewhere where you can go and just kind of the defining characteristic is you're there to talk. You're not there to do something else. So like going to soccer practice wouldn't count as a third space, whereas getting a cup of coffee, sitting down for a couple hours in the afternoon and just kind of shooting the breeze with somebody, that would be more considered. Or where I think that there's a little bit of leeway is like, well, I mean, you're getting coffee. That's the thing you're doing. You're bowling. That's the thing
Well,
you're doing.
I
But
think
also
it's the difference between just going to buy coffee and going to a coffee house, right?
yeah,
Where the objective is to buy coffee and to have a cup of coffee with friends, or to go to a pub and have drinks with friends, or go to
bowling
church
with friends.
and interact with friends on
Yeah.
that there is an element of interaction there, like there's an element of interaction at home and at work
Right.
/ school, right? I guess school is the younger kids' second place, but it's a socially motivated space. Like I go there too. Like I can
Right.
go to Walmart and buy coffee, or I can go to a coffee shop and buy coffee and actually sit with my friends, or non-friends and just interact with them there.
Yeah. But now you have drive-throughs, and you've got headphones, and people sit in their little worlds at coffee shops.
Well,
Or they go to a bowling alley, and or they really don't. But if they do go to a bowling alley, it's either like once a year for a kid's birthday party, or they go and like compete with their friends online or something. Like they're watching a YouTube video and bowling by themselves.
Well, and there's a difference between, correct me if I'm wrong, there's a difference between me taking my family to a bowling alley, which is just taking my first space to the third space, so it doesn't really turn into that third space, and going there to interact with a completely unique set of individuals that are just there for that reason.
Yeah.
Right.
And this is a problem to have a decline in social capital, a decline in shared spaces and third spaces, and it's touching a lot of different aspects of life. So if you think about I can't think of what they're called, the Silicon Valley.
Yes.
You look at Google and their famous headquarters where
Apple,
they have
the mothership or whatever they call that place.
And you've got everything you could ever need there. Restaurants and barbers and bowling alleys and everything. And you can just live there. Yeah. And they've got little cubbies for you to sleep in, and you've kind of lost your first space. And they've taken everything, the third space and the first space, and kind of scrunched them into work.
Yes.
Which is convenient. And I imagine if somebody's working late at night, they would rather sleep on a bed than on under their desk. So there are probably some advantages. Sure. But in terms of social capital, you're really putting all your eggs in one basket. And
that there even I read an article recently, and I'd be curious to get other people's thoughts on this too. The idea, for example, we've all been to workplaces where they refer to the workplace as our family away from home, right? Like this is our work family. And there's actually a lot of detriments to that. There's lots of negatives to this blurring of the lines between our spaces, this inability to break free from one to the other. That was one of the things that I always appreciated about growing up in Germany, is And this actually, the other thing that I think of is how much our zoning laws here in the United States are a detriment to being able to have a third space. Because in Germany or in England or any of those other old spaces that weren't zoned around driving, your third space was in walking distance, right? The church was in the center of town, the pub was wherever it was nearby. Like everything is close to you and it's a chance to get out with your neighbors. Now you have to drive to your third spaces. They're a long ways away. And that blurring of lines in Germany growing up, you had your workspace and your work colleagues, and you started at a specific time and you ended at a specific time. There was no glory in, oh, I'm a person who stays late. And Germans are known for being efficient and being hard workers. So I think there's a psychological benefit, and this is anecdotal, to saying, I am in my second space at work. I work here. Yep. I shut it off. I go home. And then when they go home and they're with their families, if they talk about work, it's like, stop talking about work. Let's be home. Let's enjoy our time together. This is first space. And then when you go to thirds, I think our brains benefit from that sectioning off for whatever reason. Again, that's anecdotal, but
totally. And you get an email, a work email at home, and then all of a sudden your mind is back at work and you're trying to solve this work problem. And you've mentally left the first space, you're going back to the second space. So with this decline in third spaces, and there's a lot of writing, a lot of theory about kind of the power of third spaces and what they're used for. And there's, political dissent and all kinds of different things. But in general, the theory is it's good to have a place where you can go and not be productive.
Yes.
You're not producing something that is being sold. You're not like creating content for your bowling YouTube channel. You're not raising your kids. You are going to a place and you're leaving the kind of the cycles of responsibilities from your first and second places, which you don't want to do that 24/7 because then you wouldn't have a first or second space. You want to maintain that. Work and home benefit tremendously by having this third space.
Like a battery recharge or something. We really have lost that completely, haven't we? Even the things that would have been our third space, we've turned into second spaces, into workspaces. Man.
Yeah. And like you said, you can't walk to places. So you're not going to, it's very hard to bump into somebody when you're driving to work. Whereas if you
and it's generally frowned upon, insurance wise, another,
Yeah, exactly. So you don't have that serendipitous sort of hey, I'm going to walk to work and run into this person in the park every day and get to say hi to him. That's not really a third space, but it's closer. There's a little bit more social capital there. Whereas if you're driving to work, it's oh, there's that person who cuts me off, and I recognize that bumper sticker. But even then, you have to be in a pretty small town to recognize cars because it's all so random. So there's kind of I think the thing that's interesting about third spaces, there's a lot of things that's interesting, but I think that there's some pretty interesting overlap with video games and how video games can be in some ways a third space. In some ways we're not there, and I don't think video games should ever take the place of in-person interaction. Although video games can be in-person interaction. But there are some benefits you can get. So, as well as some kind of drawbacks that video games don't fulfill the role of a third space as well as other things. So, first I wanted to talk about ways that they're different.
Okay.
So, a couple of things just right off the top. They're different in that you're not physically with somebody. You're not sitting at the coffee shop. Second is it's very easy to bowl alone with video games. You can bowl by yourself, and that's not really a third space. Even if you're playing a multiplayer game with other people from across the world and you're all in this lobby together, you're not really playing with them. You're uploading your score, your bowling score after the fact.
That's
and
true.
You're not bowling with other people. Are there any other things that strike you as kind of this isn't really third spacey?
Well, you mentioned a couple of them, and I'm looking right now at some of the I've been trying to think of some of the what are the detriments to not having a third space? And I think video games can contribute to each of these detriments. So AI helped with this one on Google Search Labs. Loneliness is something that happens because we don't have a third space. And when you play a lot of a specific type of game, I think it increases your loneliness. And even multiplayer games just played randomly, when you're not actually having a lot of social connection, you're just being pitted together, either pitted against each other or thrown together on a team. I don't think you're really having third space style interaction. So I think loneliness in video games and video gaming can easily go hand in hand. And then the lack of social development, especially with the younger generation, where their brains are still developing and they're learning, they're associating social interactivity with a positive feeling or a negative one. And a lot of that anxiety towards social interaction has to be, right, because of the isolating nature of just either screen time, quote unquote, as we talked about before, or video games. So that's one detriment. Without third place is another thing. There's research that says mental health wise, you're more likely to experience depression and anxiety without a third space, because that feeling of well-being and positivity, again, with others, that's so can be such a contributor to better mental health. Less depression, less anxiety goes away. Video games, again, that lonely atmosphere, when all of your social interactions are competitive, I think, when all of them are in a setting of, depending on the nature of the game, I think that can really knock your mental health. Community engagement. So often we've talked about certain games that have the reputation for having a negative community setup, right? Like, I guess Fortnite, right, is one of those that tends to have that kind of a reputation, and some other games. And they have community engagement teams that are trying to make sure it's a positive thing. But I think what that tends to do when you play in that atmosphere is it increases your social isolation, because you want to avoid those negative interactions, and you end up, again, losing that benefit of a third place. And then the last detriment on here, it does say like third places are crucial for the local economy to create job opportunities. In terms of economic development of a community, if everyone's just playing video games, we know the cliche of can't hold a job or can't be economically successful. That goes on the hiring side as well. If everyone's just too busy entertaining themselves too much, like as we've talked about, when you're not mindful about your gaming, and one of those ways you have to be mindful, as you've mentioned before, is socially. And if we just game in a non-mindful, socially unhealthy way, I think that's all the ways that games can be the opposite of the benefits of what a third space can provide.
It can exacerbate this trend of losing social capital and losing shared third spaces and things like that. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is the rise in, or the decline in third spaces and the decline in social capital also, interestingly, coincides with the rise in video games. And I don't think that there's any causal relationship there. I'm not saying video games are causing this, or even this is causing video games.
Particularly any kind of a thing, right?
Yeah, but they're happening at the same time. And so a lot of the fears people express about video games are partly fears about society as a whole. And they're thinking, man, why aren't you out there playing with your friends like I did when I was your age? Why? And the answer that and to blame video games is overly simplistic, because this is a societal wide trend. You can't blame video games any more than you can blame bowling alleys or blame, any one factor. But this is a kind of a symptom type of thing.
Right.
At the same time, I think that there are some ways that video games can fill the role of a third space if we're doing things mindfully, and if we're thinking about it, if we're doing them, if we try, then we can turn video games, or we can turn our habits of video games into third spaces.
Right.
So, for example, having a group of people you play with on a regular basis.
Yeah.
I know that this is, I know a lot of people who have their Destiny 2 clan or World of Warcraft clan. And that is both of those are competitive games, but they're competitive, but you're on a team.
Right.
It's us against them, and so we get together every Thursday and we play World of Warcraft, and we do our clan raids, and we develop our strategies, and we do all this stuff, but we're doing it together. Multiplayer games where ideally you'd be in the same room.
Right.
If you can do a multiplayer game where you're in the same room with your compatriots, then that's more of a third space. But even if you're not, now you have this third space where you're meeting on Discord or whatever, and you're getting together to do this thing, and you talk about the game while you're there, but you're not being productive in the pure like creating money value sense of the word. You're just hanging out, you're talking. And this is something that I've noticed with our gaming group is that it's a third space.
I really think it is. Like having just had the opportunity, all of us live in 3 different locations across the United States, right? And having had the opportunity to hang out in person with Mavin this week was awesome. It was so cool to see him in IRL, right? And because it's been a while.
He does exist.
He's
does.
Not just like we actually joked about that when he texted me, like, we actually exist in real life. And I will say, some of these social media tools, like you mentioned Discord, have come far enough. I remember what it used to feel like when you'd see someone that you hadn't seen in person for so long. Mm-hmm. I felt some of that. I was so excited to see him. At the same time, the goodbye and the hello were both different because I knew that we're going to talk virtually in person. Like that's the actual interaction, right? Virtually in person. Mm-hmm. There's no delay anymore. Like even us having this conversation, for as much as I like hanging out in person and there's benefits to that hangout, I do feel like we've come pretty darn close to, we have a set time that we do it. I'm always bummed when we can't. Yeah. Like I feel like the interaction is as close to a third space as it can be. And the game provides us a vehicle to continue to hang out and converse. But the game, in many ways, isn't even that important, right? We play a different game almost every time we get together. It's really just a hangout session, and we choose the game sometimes on the fly. It's the ones that Mavin hasn't already beat or whatever, and that we have to come back and play.
Those are
hard to find.
Yeah, those are hard to find. But no, exactly.
Yeah, it is true. If you just rely on social media and like chatting and texting, I do feel like that there's an obvious disconnect. Live hanging out on Discord or whatever people are using nowadays is pretty darn close. It's really, really cool. Like, and as I said, the hello and the goodbye was like, oh, I'll see you. Like, I think we said, I'll see you on Monday. The same way you would say to a friend, we're going to hang out on Monday. So I think they've gotten pretty close.
If it's synchronous, asynchronous is a little bit different. If like you said, sending text messages or sending Snapchats or whatever, whatever the kids are doing these days. Asynchronous is a little bit different because, again, a bowling alley. Like if you think of the attributes of a bowling alley, it's synchronous. You're all there and at the same time. But like you said, Discord or Zoom or whatever, it's synchronous. You're there, you're communicating, you can see facial expressions, you can see body language, and you're doing this shared hobby that in most cases it's not your first space or your second space.
That's right.
Unless you're a video game developer, or I guess for Mavin, and he's a professional YouTuber, so that's in some ways that's a blurring of the line a little bit, but it's also different.
Well, and didn't he mention when we were with our interview with him last week? Didn't he mention something along the lines of the clear difference between? Because I've asked him this too. Like, is gaming different now that you get paid to do it? And he mentioned that gaming, when he's grabbing footage for his work, right? It feels a certain way, and it is different. But there's still plenty of space for him to feel like when we get together in game, it's different. It's a different feel. It brings back the joy and the love of gaming So even that, so maybe there's a lesson there about third spaces. They can be similar, especially if you love
Yeah.
your job.
Yeah.
Similar but different can still create some clear lines of delineation.
Yeah.
You know?
And one other benefit of third spaces, I think, so we've got social capital,
Mhm.
the ability to go and ask a neighbor for, to borrow a lawnmower or something like that.
Right.
That there's a lot of different ways that they measure this, and it has been declining over the past 30 or 40 years. Just we don't have interactions with people who are not in our first or second spaces that often.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've also got the decline in third spaces. And then there's also a kind of a trend that's interesting called the friendship recession. People just have fewer friends, and they have fewer friends that they do things with. And again, there's all different kinds of ways that people that you can measure this. But so for one example, just in the past couple of years, those who state they have 10 or more close friends, excluding family members, was 33% in 1990.
Okay.
33% of people said that they've got 10 or more close friends outside of their family. And now, at least in 2021, that's decreased to 13%.
Wow.
And in particular, men seem more affected. So the number of American men without a close friend has jumped 5 times since 95, from 3 to 15% from 1990 to 2021. That's no close friends. So not 10 plus close friends, 0.
Wow.
So you've got to think that I mean, that's the most extreme example,
Yeah.
0. But that trend, and there are a lot of other studies that show that as well. People in the Western world, particularly in America, particularly men, have a hard time making friends and having friends. And that's kind of like, if you go from social capital to third space to friend, like that's a problem, and that's a core thing.
Yeah. Like how so many thoughts about all of that. And this is where I think this is an important conversation, because I think from a mindful gaming perspective, I think it would be really interesting to think about how can we mindfully create third spaces out of our gaming experiences. And I maybe you've already thought about some ways that you think we can do this. I think it's just an interesting open-ended brainstorming session that we could have.
Yeah.
That also needs some research and some actual academic attention. That being said, when you think about all of these benefits, do you consider yourself a social person? I guess is one question. Swift, you, the individual, do you when you know a social event is coming that's going to involve people you don't know, are you excited about that or anxious?
Not excited.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah.
But when it's going to be a group of people that you know, are you excited or not?
Often, well, I mean, it depends.
I mean, people, your friends. Let's say the people that they're your friends.
I would say, yeah, that's more exciting for sure.
So I feel like the developing thought. I am with you. I feel like I am a totally socially inept human being, and yet I've grown up in a world where that was both of these things, right? Like both full of this lack of social interaction and full of it. And I wonder if the majority of our third space interactions, because we have fewer friends, are in situations where we don't know people, where we're not mindful about the people who will be there. And so the majority of our social interactions are the ones that I know people who love the idea of going out and meeting new people, those sick or like those sick humans who just enjoy social interaction. Like, what's wrong with that? Yeah, weirdos. Yeah. But I don't, that stresses me out. The idea of that coming up stresses me out. But every time I know we're going to hang out, I feel great. So if the third space is normally reserved for going out with your friends, being out and we've lost our friends, and we've lost that ability or that opportunity to have those kinds of interactions, think about what we've lost with that.
Yeah.
When I get to hang out with you guys, my battery recharges and I feel rested and recuperated and more ready to go the next day. And again, I miss that interaction on the days that I don't have it. When I have to interact with people that I don't know in a fake third space that wasn't deliberately or mindfully put in that place, it uses up my battery. and I need to actually plan time where I'm either by myself or hanging out with friends to recover from that. So I would say if we were to do an inventory, and this goes to any of our listeners as well, if you were to do an inventory and you were to consider how many of your social interactions outside of work and family are in that restful friend zone or in that socially anxious, anxiety-filled meeting new people zone, a third space fills that friendship one, fills that bucket so much more and brings all those health benefits. Whereas the other one, for me, brings a lot of anxiety and a lack of confidence. And again, I know that's not everybody, but I'm wondering aloud, gaming has the opportunity to create that space for you virtually if you do it right. It can either create that positive situation for you, or it can create two others that are either socially anxious or isolating. Does that make sense? Am I clear about that? So if our gaming interactions are on our own, then we're gonna, and not with anybody, then they're gonna be lonely. If our gaming interactions with society, with the community, are random and they're dictated by a lobby in a multiplayer game, that for me is anxiety inducing. I know it's not the same way for everybody, but if our gaming interactions are with our group, with our nerdy gaming group, whether that's gaming online or D&D or whatever else that could be for you, then I get all the positives out of it. So in order for us to mindfully do it, I think that kind is the important one. And that's just, once again, anecdotal in my own experience, but those are three very different experiences.
Absolutely. And one of the reasons for that is that when you game with the same people, you build up social capital with each other. And so whether that's used inside a game or inside the game, can you come help me with this thing I'm doing in the game? Or, we're playing a first-person shooter and we learn how to have each other's backs and stuff like that. Or out of the game. Like, you can't borrow a cup of sugar if you live across the country. But if somebody loses a job, now you've got a little bit of a support network where you can go to them and say, hey, if anybody knows anybody who's hiring for my particular set of skills, or if you need advice,
just to commiserate, right? Yeah, how many times has our gaming group just decided we're not, like, we didn't necessarily say we're not gaming tonight, but our discussion was in depth enough that we just ended up not even getting to the game.
Yeah, no, and we're building that social capital in that third space and building friendships, which, again, you can go to Wikipedia and go to the friendship recession page, and you can see.
I'd never heard that before.
It sounds like, man, like, who cares? Like, just, everybody has a friend or two, everybody has family, but there are a lot of impacts of having a friend.
See, for me, friendship capital almost sounds sadder than an economic recession. Friendship recession sounds sadder than an economic recession, just because of the implications of, man, I can deal with having less money but less friends.
Friendship makes you live longer. It helps you cope with stress. It gives you emotional support through difficult times or good times. It promotes healthy habits. It reduces loneliness. It gives you a sense of belonging, like there's a place where you fit in. It reduces psychological stress or helps you deal with it. It actually reduces cardiovascular disease, which is wild because
that honestly, based on what I just said, makes some sense to me. It's are all my interactions with people I don't know and socially anxiety-ridden ones, or are they? I genuinely equate one with restful versus stressful.
Yeah.
Right. Though our interactions are ones I look forward to and are restful. All the other social interactions are not that thing. Right. Yeah.
So being able to build a third space with your gaming can have. So we've talked about awe. We've talked about a bunch of other ways that playing video games can actually help you physically be more healthy. Mm-hmm. But this is another one where if you're able to build and maintain friendships through games, that's one way to make it a third space, make gaming a third space. If you're able to have it be people you're friends with rather than random people, if you can kind of maintain some, it doesn't necessarily have to be a strict group where, here's the in group and here's the out group. But if it's generally at least the same general people over time, that helps create this. And there's all these all these positive benefits, and all of these ways that it's overcoming some pretty serious negatives in a society where we are increasingly becoming more separated from each other and more distance from each other, even while we're living next door. There's just a whole lot of benefits you can get.
Well, and so I don't want to take away from your outline, if depending on what you have. It seems like the last question to ask then, like, I'm thinking of those people who are in some form of gaming isolation, and I pretty clearly identified all the potential risks. So just like having this third space is so beneficial for you from a mental and physical health perspective, that means not having one of those is detrimental in those same ways, right? Not to be alarmist, but that means lower life expectancy. That means higher risk of cardiovascular disease. That means loneliness and all those other things. So where do you start? Like, we started because we knew each other and where we worked and went to school, and realized that there was this connective tissue in our love for gaming, and started playing together. If you're not in a situation like that, and for for particularly socially isolated people, because these spaces are crucial, how do we use game? How do they form a gaming third space is the question.
Yeah, I think we can come up with some. I think that there are a lot of ways to do that.
Yeah,
but I'll mention 3 that I've kind of been thinking about and that I've come up with. Another way to say this is, how do you find people? How do you find your people in video games?
Huh.
So the answer, you can't say, well, just go find your people, because that's the question. How do you do that?
right.
One way to watch somebody live stream. Find a game that you like, and the comments section of that game.
Yeah.
If you're on Twitch or on YouTube, there's a comments. They're referred to as chat. Hey, chat, what do you think about this? And if you watch any gamer, there's always some of the chat that's talking about the game.
Yeah.
But there's also chat that's talking about, they're famous for just asking like dumb questions. Okay, guys, red vines or Twizzlers?
Yeah.
That's an important question. It is an
important question.
They'll talk about that. And
wait.
You'll,
Red vines or Twizzlers?
Oh, for sure. The good one. Twizzlers. It's got to be Twizzlers.
Can I give you my answer?
Both.
Yes. The answer is yes. And or I can come around the corner and present a third option that's better.
Which is?
Australian licorice. Australian style licorice.
Weird.
No, it's the best. When it's in the little chunks, the little denser licorice chunks. Have you had these? Have you had Australian licorice?
I don't know.
I've my word!
You can go to a gas station. Can you buy it at a gas station?
Oh yeah, or the grocery store.
It's the little pellets.
Yeah, it's the little ones, but not. So this is we're gonna get off track, like we do say. So
we never get off track.
There's the little cherry, like those are nasty. The cherry Twizzler brand, like peel aparts. If those were the strawberry Twizzler flavor, they'd be fine. The cherry tastes like cough medicine to me. It's all the same fake cherry flavor. Not those. Not the Twizzler small chunky ones. Yeah, Australian style licorice. And you can find actual Aussie brands. Like, look for Australian style licorice. You're welcome. This is the way. See what just happened in our little third space here? I believe I've just made your life better by suggesting Australian style licorice.
I was thinking, how am I going to determine? How am I going to recognize Australian licorice in the wild? Here's a brand. Yes. Wiley Wallaby.
That's how you will recognize it. Yep.
Yeah. So look for Wiley Wallaby.
And I don't think I've had that kind. Target sells one. Anyway, they're out there. Australian style licorice.
It's fascinating.
It's the only.
Okay, so
Anyway.
that's a perfect example of
Trader
goes on
Joe's
in a
sells
chat.
it, and like Trader Joe's sells it in these
Really?
little tubs. Yes, Trader Joe's. Yes.
Australian. Okay, see, perfect,
Mhm.
perfect example. And I'm
Exactly.
going to now have to go find some Australian style
Yes.
licorice.
Do it.
So one, watch a streamer that plays a game you play.
Yes. I love this.
2, this is similar but also quite different because the second one is Discord.
Yep.
A lot of streamers will have a Discord. A lot of, if not every streamer,
Yes.
a lot of games have their own Discord. And so just starting from the bare minimum, let's say you don't find a streamer, you just go to the Discord server of a game you like to play. And most of those will have an LFG channel looking for games. So
do we have an LFG channel?
not, I don't. Well,
we will now. By the time our listeners get on now, we will have an, because we need to use ours to create third spaces.
Yes. So people are always looking for games, and whether it's something like a competitive multiplayer game, or whether it's just like a 1v1, or anyway, the point is there's a lot of different kinds, a lot of Minecraft.
Yes.
Whatever. There's tons of different servers on Discord. Look for
ours. Look for ours. Come to ours. Come to the Pixel Professor Discord. The link's in the show notes. That will be a
Come
space.
to the LFG channel.
Yes.
So either of the game itself or of a particular streamer. What's interesting there is you can start to kind of build friendships with the other people who watch the same streamer. And you can start to you kind of bump into each other in the chat. Hey, like we were just playing Project Zomboid together the other day, and now we're both watching this person play Project Zomboid.
Oh,
now
so cool.
It becomes more of like a bowling league than an isolation sort of situation. And the third one is a little bit. I'm trying to think. It's more, the strategy is schedule a time.
Okay, but with people you already know.
Yeah. I think that's, and I hesitate to say it because it kind of feels like a cop-out, but I think having a scheduled time, because it's not really introducing you to new people, but once you found some people you like to play with, whether that's your sibling or your coworker or neighbor or somebody you find in the comments section of a streamer or on Discord, schedule a time and have it be a regular thing. Once a month, every other Thursday, twice a week, whatever it is, where you plan on it. Bowling leagues don't happen just serendipitously. You plan them.
I think
third spaces.
That might be the most. We talked about how this doesn't. I don't think gaming is a true third space unless it's a synchronous experience where it feels like you're actually purposefully hanging out. As you said, and my experience says it bears that same thing. If it is not a purposeful, scheduled thing, it's like when you try to play D&D. Like, let's like my kids and I have it's not technically Star Wars D&D, but Star Wars role playing. Like we had that scheduled every week. We would play it, and then once one of my kids moved out, we were like, "Don't worry, we'll find a time." That was years ago. And we have never gotten back together again because we've never been able to schedule a specific time for that activity. Our group works because we expect and when schedules change, we change our time to go with that schedule change, and we just expect it to happen. It will not happen, as you're saying. It will not be a synchronous, mindful experience if you don't plan it. You have to plan it.
That might be one of the downsides. That might be one of the things that you lose when you don't have a coffee house to go meet at.
Yeah,
or at the same time.
Church is similar, right? Church, churches, the Sunday school or whatever. If you go to a weekly Sunday school, and if you go to church on Sunday, you've got the service you go to at a specific time, and Sundays, and it's the same time all the time. They have signs outside, and that's when you go. Like that just scheduled thing, or even the coffee house thing. It's usually, hey, that's where we go after work on blank days, like when you can walk there after work or whatever, or the pub
on the way home.
Right.
Yep.
Friday nights after work, we walk to the pub. We play darts. We watch whatever sports and we have a drink together. Like
Yeah.
if it's not a regularly occurring thing, especially from a socially anxious perspective, it needs to already occupy a space in my mind. Like it needs to be
Right.
so I have no excuse to get out of it, because even if there is a little bit of nerves that go away, I know I have to be there, and then the nerves go away so quickly when I realize it's a safe space. These are awesome friends.
At least until we start making fun of you about,
Which,
whatever.
that's true. It is true. Why I still feel
for the
psychologically safe with you guys, I'll never know. But I'm a glutton for punishment, apparently.
Just as an endorsement, you got to go, or as a plug for the Skyjack series. Basically, that could be the subtitle of that series could be called "Make Fun of E-Rock Tenor."
It really is. And that being said, it is a lot of fun. And when we get back into this, that's what I look forward to. I've already started up therapy again, because I hear you can load up on the front end.
Yeah.
And so
pre-therapy.
Pre-therapy. Like, this is what's about to happen. I need to, and I'm ready. I'm ready to be berated.
Every month or two, Mavin will say, I go back and watch Skyjack, and man, we were mean to you. And that's the takeaway is like, man, wow.
I feel like
I don't feel bad about it.
No,
nor should you.
Nor should you.
Yeah.
I mean, you probably should. If you were an empathetic human being, you should. But I'm fine that you're not, because I don't need you to do it. And in the comments section, I will say it was fun to watch. Like, if anything, a group of fans form who were like, "Hey, leave him alone." And then it was like, "These are my people." And so you're helping me find other third spaces for when we inevitably offend each other to the point that we need to find new ones. Yep. I already know where to look. So thank you is what I'm saying. Thank you for the making fun.
Anytime. That's why I do it. It's for your long-term health and longevity.
So kind.
You're welcome.
Well, I will say, I actually looked this up. I have a couple other ones.
Okay, yeah.
Well, one is I'm going to play a multiplayer game, and I think, like we said, I think there's pluses and minuses to that. Like, I think just jumping on Fortnite. If you're jumping on Fortnite with the goal of making a few new friends, maybe that's okay. I will say one of my favorite stories, maybe I've told this on this podcast before. One of my cousins used to play, what was the name of that? Pre-World of Warcraft, EverQuest? Was that? I think that was the name of it. It was the big multiplayer.
Like RuneScape or like.
It was the multiplayer, massive multiplayer online RPG. And he talked about how they formed a guild. I remember forming a guild in Star Wars Galaxies and made some really cool friendships that way. Again, you can get on there and you can still play a multiplayer game like that in total isolation and never make really, or just with random interactions. I think it is important to find a guild and become a member of a group. So he did, and they talked about how one of the members of the guild actually had cancer and passed away, and yet they were all over the place. But they actually got together and had a funeral in EverQuest for that friend. And awesome. All basically in the chat talked about favorite interactions they had with that friend in a game. And my cousin talked about it being one of the most, if not the most moving funeral he had ever been to. And none of them had met this guy in real life. I didn't even know what he looked like. And I think that's amazing. I think it's probably more healthy when you do. Like, the Discord element, I think, is great. I think it becomes a richer interaction when you can see and like actually interact and see someone, look someone in the eyes and talk to them that way. But you can find those relationships, I think, in multiplayer games.
Love it.
So and then interesting. I'm looking at a Reddit forum right now, actually, that's talking about how to form new gaming groups. And as you said, like, I've live streamed chats. Also, just this one person on here is reporting going to Discord for a small gaming podcast and made friends there that I now play games with regularly, and then has even met a couple with them in real life, which is kind of fun. Like, that's cool. That's the kind of thing that can happen if you're purposeful. And then one of them actually gave a suggestion that's actually kind of interesting, I think. Bumble, if you've heard of the app Bumble, it's like a matching site, has a mode, or a BFF mode, where you're looking for friends, and you can have gaming as one of those attributes. So then it's a little bit more gamified, and you can find people who are interested in what you're doing. So if you're one of those who are socially anxious, a lot of this might be anxiety inducing. You do have to have, I think, at least enough courage to make some initial steps. That being said, I think it's important to start where you are. And if you're already in a space where you're gaming or watching streamers or listening to podcasts, where you already have that instant connection, just start there, even if it's just reading at first and a comment or two, and you play a game together. That might be tough, but just one small interaction, all it takes is a little victory to check off a box, and then I think you move a step closer to a richer interaction. Because it can be.
Well, come join us in our Discord.
Yes.
We would love to. This has made me think. I hadn't thought about this before, but I love the idea of having like a scheduled time where we play some game.
We need to do that
with the community, with people, with and it's a couple hours. It's not like an entire Saturday, but it's like, hey, come stop by and hang out with us as we do this thing, and usually play this game or build something or whatever it is. Yeah, that's interesting.
You give us some ideas for. I could see all kinds of things working, but give us some ideas, you audience out there, for ways that you think this could be interesting. Whether or not we schedule a time every week where this is our Pixel Professor game time. Throughout the week on Discord, we vote for whatever game we're going to play in advance, or happy to even create a server for something, whether it's Minecraft or Space Engineers or something like that, or we all just keep building on it together. That has pluses and minuses. I love the idea of being mindful about whatever game we select each week. But let's brainstorm together and let's create a third space. And I think that third space being a manageable size where we're interacting is important. So we'll have to manage that as we go and figure out what that looks like. But that seems like a really valuable thing.
Different guilds or whatever it might be. Sweet.
That's a good idea. Ooh, you're on something there, Swift. Let's sort that out. Let's charge like turtles into the third space.
Wrong along.
Yes. Let's do it, but let's be present. Let's do this. Yeah. Well, when we say let's play some games together, let's play some games together.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Together. Let's build some social capital. Let's fight the friendship recession.
Yes.
Let's bowl together.
That sounds like gear right there. Fight the friendship recession. If there's one thing that might help us right now in this politically separate, degraded world that we live in, it's fighting the friendship recession. Man. Well, let's fight it. One friendship at a time, huh?
We are the Rage Against the Machine of the friendship recession.
Yes, I'm pumped. I'm fired up. That's awesome. Well, guys,
stay tuned for more where this comes from, this came from. And please, if you could, share this podcast episode with friends and family. Go to your third space and drop this off, whether that's a YouTube comment section or a Twitch stream or a Discord server or Bumble.
Yeah.
We our links work at all those places.
Mm-hmm.
So drop a link, drop a like, drop a subscrition, and or pick up a subscription.
Pick up, like, subscribe, whatever that button is in whatever form. Don't drop it.
Anyway,
get it. Yes.
Don't drop it like it's hot. Click it like it's.
Pick it up like it's room temperature and comforting.
Like a third space.
Yes, let's get it together, everybody.
Hey, good luck editing this episode. You rock. You can just take out basically everything I said, beginning and the end, and then also in the middle there.
No,
but
it's all
other
there.
than that,
it's all going in. It's all going in. So,
all right.
Bye, everybody.
We'll see y'all next week.
Bye, everybody.